So thanks again for joining us at the 2024 Sloan Analytics Conference Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Kager, also known as the Craft Analytics Group. My name is Esteban Calderon, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is a pleasure to introduce the presentation, Make the Most of the Current Moment in Soccer Analytics. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our speaker, Tyler Cox, Director of Analytics at the Seattle Sounders.
Thanks. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Tyler Cox, and this is Making the Most of the Current Moment in Soccer Analytics. A bit about my background. I work for the Seattle Sounders, where I'm the Director of Analytics and have been for 2 years now. Prior to that, I was fortunate enough to work at Arsenal for a little over 8 years, and I've been in the industry for over 10 years now, and some of that talk will be represented in this talk. And here's my clicker. Cool. So the biggest first question will be, why is it a moment? So for me, it's a really cool moment in soccer analytics right now because there is a huge breadth of data. There's so many good providers out there offering a lot of stuff. There's so many good providers offering raw data that you can do a bunch with. And the technical ability of the industry is increasing as a whole. There's a lot more money going into it from people at the top who are making the decisions of where to allocate the money. So there's more money being spent off the pitch, which is also exciting. There are a lot of proven success cases. Some of the badges are up there. And that is also really helping drive interest and money in spending it in an analytics department as opposed to an additional player. And also AI. AI is not something I'm going to focus on in this talk, but it is an important moment, and we are already implementing it. And I think everybody will be implementing it in some way, and it is just exacerbating all of the things on this slide already. So on the right is a standard technology S-curve. There was an original product, so early on we had no data in soccer analytics, then we had some eventing data, and there's been an introduction of tracking data, but we're still fairly early days in soccer. And I am of the opinion that we're in this innovation space now. So there is a whole bunch of, again, good information, and we can now start to innovate with it, and people are doing some really cool, creative things that are still in this little space where we're kind of unsettled, and there's honestly a lot of opportunity there, which is what this guy talks about. So right now, data availability is far outweighing data ability, in my opinion. So there's, again, a ton of great data, and there are not all that many clubs who are well poised to fully utilize it. And I put this little note on capacity. So ability, mostly I'm referring to capacity. There's some really good technical people in the space. It's not like people don't know what to do with all this data, but people don't always have, one, the investment to use it, so there's not a huge data analysis team at most clubs. And two, they have to spend time on lots of other stuff. So right now, availability is outpacing ability or capacity. But ultimately, that's an opportunity, and there's a huge opportunity right now in soccer analytics. So what's available? If it's outweighing it, there must be a lot of stuff available, and there is. On the pitch, you have eventing and tracking. Those are very well talked about, but there's also physical. There's some cognitive data starting to come out that's pretty exciting. There's movement, which we'll talk about later in this talk, that goes along with a lot of the physical data. And in the front office, you have financial information, you have contract information, player development history, transfer history, league history. There's a bunch of stuff that will go into, a lot of times the front office portion is more important than any of the on-the-pitch metrics for a player signing. So it's a huge, robust, and really valuable data set that also doesn't often get leveraged. Sports science, there's physical load, there's all the gym work. This is mostly your own team, but there's a lot that can be done in sports science too, and a lot that is captured. And business side, there's ticketing, there's marketing, there's a whole lot of stuff on the business side that I get asked about somewhat often because we try to market the players, and to do that, can we use cool data from the pitch, because everybody likes the pitch. So there's all these data sets, but they're pretty siloed right now in their different zones. So within those different zones, you would really like them all to be in the same spot. You'd like to not have to access 20 different tables to do 20 different things. So it's a lot of available data. Does it all come from the same provider? No, it pretty much all comes from different providers. And that is a data engineering issue. So is it easy to combine at least? Also no. It's hard. And it's an issue especially for teams that a lot of times have one analyst who doesn't have a data engineering background, or a data scientist who doesn't have a data engineering background, or a data engineer who can put it all together but doesn't have a data science background or an analyst background. So it does take a team to put all this stuff together and make it as valuable as it can be. So to recap all that, there are a bunch of data streams. They come from a bunch of different places. They cost a lot of money. They're hard to combine to utilize together. And a small team of people, often without all the necessary skill sets, are asked to take that data and do a bunch of cool stuff with it. That's all going on at the same time. And it seems inefficient. I agree with that statement. Which begs the comment, I said this was all an opportunity. Which it is. I think it's a big opportunity, but I think you have to do a handful of things correctly in order to really realize it. And a lot of those are the data engineering pieces I just talked about. So here's the stuff that I've seen over 10 years in the industry that end up leading to clubs being successful with their analytics department, and some stuff that people probably underutilize. So emphasize engineering, that's a huge one. I will always tout good data engineering. Try to pull as many of those sources as you can, as cleanly as you can, to be fully automated, to be fully combined. I think people will spend time and money trying to get cool things on the field or in the hands of coaches that they could probably spend on the back end. And it's way less exciting to deliver, but having a robust infrastructure allows the flexibility that everybody really needs, and will also really allow you to pivot as quickly as you can and use the newest data sources that are coming down the pipe very quickly. So emphasize engineering. You want to be robust and flexible. Spend time on what matters. I think a lot of people can also spend time on things that feel like good deliverables, but are ultimately just for the next match. And data has a really cool ability to look over a large scope of matches or seasons or leagues. So spending a bunch of time on the next match, how you're going to beat your next opponent, is probably not as helpful. You have 5 to 6 to 7 to sometimes more experts in the coaching staff and the video analyst staff. They're already looking at the next match. So data can really help if you utilize it to look over longer time periods and say, these are some trends that we found, or go do some research instead of maybe spend 2 extra hours on a match report. And then tracking your process. I think tracking your process saves a bunch of time ultimately, and then is something that can be easy to ignore in the moment because you're always trying to deliver. But the clubs I've seen that are the most successful are tracking process, and then they're updating the process. And they're saying, this didn't work. Great, now we have an answer, and we made a mistake. And if you can embrace mistakes, that might be the most important thing you can do. Then reintegrate them into your process. Don't do this stuff. Don't be too proud. I think I've been guilty of this, certainly. And I think a lot of the industry can also say, this is really cool data that's available, but we can build it. We can build a new runs model. We can build a new type of expected goals model for these situations we're interested in. We can build an expected threat model that we think is slightly more relevant to our club. You probably can, but you can save a whole lot of time and you can get an answer onto the pitch a lot quicker if you allow other people to provide that information to you. So again, lean into data companies who are doing really good things. And if you spend the time you would spend building those models on your data engineering pipeline, on maybe some of your visualization to get it onto the pitch in the future, that can be a really valuable reallocation of your energy. Don't stack expertise. I talked about this a little bit with having a bunch of coaches doing a pre-match report, don't then necessarily spend all your time working on a pre-match report. Try to realize that you're in a data world, the expert in data, and then spend time writing code, spend time doing research, spend time trying to produce a new metric as opposed to spending a whole lot of time trying to deliver immediately to stakeholders in areas that they're already experts. And then don't neglect storytelling. I think this is a really important one. We'll get into a little bit on the next slide. Storytelling, like data storytelling and visualization, is very, very important. I have worked on a lot of projects where the project was really cool and the answer was really cool from a technical perspective and an academic perspective, and then you get to the point where you're delivering it to a stakeholder, to a general manager, to a coach, and it falls flat because you don't do a good job. I won't say you. I have been in the situation where I didn't do a good job translating it to someone who didn't have the technical expertise but had massive soccer expertise. So spending time on how you're going to tell that story and translating it into whatever sport it is, but soccer, is very, very valuable and shouldn't be underlooked. Okay, so say all of those things are done. How do you actually get everything onto the pitch? Because otherwise, like I just mentioned, it's all academic. You have to build relationships with the stakeholders. So spending time with head coaches, spending time with general managers, building trust in you is ultimately building trust in the data. So people trust people that they like. So build that relationship, and then you can deliver the information, and the information will be much better accepted if there's a good relationship and it's collaborative. Data can also come from very much a perspective of, here's the answer, and coaches can push back on that if you're just saying, this is what it is, and the coach says, that's not what I thought it was. I was at drinks last night with some people and we were talking about this exact same thing. If you tell someone that there's something new and exciting, that probably means, hey, one of your preconceived notions that you've held for your entire career is wrong. And that's a hard thing to translate. But it's way easier if you're friends with that person and they already enjoy talking to you and you've built an actual relationship so far. And then visualization. I touched on it earlier. Data visualization, in my opinion, is still way undervalued. I myself have spent a bunch of time upskilling on how I do visualization, reading and taking courses on design, graphical information, and it's paid off quite a bit. It's really helped the Sounders get stuff onto the field because people want to engage with the things I deliver. So if you spend a bunch of time, even if it feels silly, saying, is this the right font? I'll spend half an hour figuring that out. Or what about this color palette? I don't know anything about color theory. Maybe I should look into it. That is paid dividends in my world, and I think can pay dividends for everybody. Again, if people know that you deliver stuff that looks nice, they're going to open your emails more often. It can be as simple as that. Here's a very simple example of exactly that. These are all three the exact same data. So this is top goal scorers in MLS last season. You can see Denis Bouanga scored the most, but you probably see that from the third graph most easily. The left is just an Excel table, which works fine, and people will read it and they'll get that. But you get a little bit better if you put it into a bar chart, and you can start to see just how much more Denis Bouanga was impactful than some of the other guys. And there's a clear top three here. And then finally, the most relevant one will be for us. Jordan Morris is our center forward at the Sounders. So if you title it with a question that you're answering in the deliverable, and you make it look nice, and everyone can see really quickly who each person plays for, and exactly how many goals they scored, this looks nice, people will engage with it, and the information then gets delivered well this time, and next time people are going to look at this and know what's going on. All right, so here's a case study on player movement of kind of a culmination of all the things I've been talking about. So we ingest some data from Skill Corner, the data provider, and they have some really cool player movement data that, again, is something we could eventually build, but right now we don't have the capacity to do it, and it takes a lot of time to write these models. So we ingest some player movement type information from them, and then you can get a more holistic picture of player decision making, because you can figure out where they're moving and when they're making the most common movements that the coaches will ultimately talk about. So here, this is Jude Bellingham, the guy with a bunch of arrows coming off of him. He plays for Real Madrid. He's a central midfielder, and he scores a bunch of goals. And he does that because of how he decides to move. So right now, this ball is going out to the left wing, and Bellingham can make a few decisions. He can go over to support. He can drop in kind of underneath this defender, which is not an uncommon movement for a central midfield player. He can run a bit ahead of the ball to support, or he can just take off and go straight behind, which is not usually what central midfielders do. But it is what Bellingham does. So he decides on this straight off option. He runs behind, and he gets in behind, and he ends up scoring a goal in this play. So this is just a snippet of really what's become a great way to show how players think and move on the pitch for us. So now we can talk about players and say, instead of has this player scored goals, does this player move in ways that goal scorers move? So do we want to get a guy right now in this position that is a goal scorer? For us at the Sounders, we play in a shape where we have two defensive midfielders. It wouldn't really make sense for us to look, sure, we'll take Bellingham, but to look after a player who's trying to run in behind all the time. We want someone who's going to support the center backs and who's going to play off the fullbacks and then turn and break lines. So his movement type would actually not be the ideal profile that we're looking at. And now we can capture that, which is really cool because previously it all takes eventing data. So a player has to receive the ball, make a pass, and they might do that 100 times a game if they're really involved. But now we can pair that with run types, and they're consistently running everywhere. So here's an example of a deliverable we have based on these run types of some of our players and the run patterns that differ between players. So on the right, this is from one of our matches against LAFC last year. The player on the right is our right winger. The player on the left is our left winger in the exact same match. So our left winger was a much more progressive runner. He also made a lot fewer runs. Our right winger was more supportive. And I guess I can explain these a little bit more. I normalize all the starts of the run type to common XY. And then this is just, if this player were always in the same place, which direction would they choose to consistently run? So it can give you a nice visualization like this that then will have certain lobes for different types of players. A lot of times it has to do with where they play on the pitch, but if you compare two center forwards, you can see one who's always making runs in behind and tends to make them from left to right a little bit more, or a center forward who's dropping in a lot to collect the ball. So they're almost like a line type radars, and you can kind of look at the different areas that get highlighted. They're quite nice. In this game, our right winger, who's one of our most dangerous players, he was consistently making good runs. He played the whole game. Our left winger was not doing all that much, and he ended up getting taken off in like the 60th minute. And it was really borne out afterwards when coaches said, hey, we think he did a great job this game at getting involved. What was his dynamic movement pattern like? And then opponents bypassed, you can also start adding a bunch of cool layers into it. So you can say, okay, they're running like this. Are they running like this and it's not dangerous? Or is it really dangerous? Or is it not dangerous? Sometimes you'll have a long run forward and then you bypass negative opponents, which means you're running forward, but you're being lazy about it. Or you're going diagonal to the movement of play. So this has been an example of something that has really helped us quite a bit visualize how players move, because ultimately coaches don't tell players to go score a goal, right? They would like every player to go score a goal. They tell them how to move on the pitch. So in training, they'll say, you have to be making an overlap in this situation. You have to move inside to support in this situation. We want to create these triangles. We want to play out in the back. So you can now bucket these on the pitch. And here's just a couple examples of coach speak translated into this movement type data speak. So when the ball moves out wide, give a support option in the pocket. Now we can interpret this as, look at all the supporting runs towards the ball carrier when the runner is coming from the wing. Don't threaten him behind until we've broken the first line. We can say, has the first line been broken? Look at vertical runs with a high threat after progressive passes. Crash the box from the weak side when we switch the point of attack. A lot of times if you're building down the right, you want your weak side winger to be coming in the back of the box because you're hoping to get a cross or a cutback. And now we can look at runs on the opposite side of the pitch from the ball that end up in the box. So are our players actually doing these things that the coaches are talking about in training? And ultimately, it's a very helpful thing that was readily available. We just had to pay for it. And we paid less than we would have in development time by a wide margin. So it's an example of us being able to have a pipeline that could ingest that quickly and say, hey, this data is available. We think it could help us. Let's get it in here. And then we did, and we got it onto the pitch quickly. And a lot of that was through visualization, communication with coaches, and also, I should mention, communication with a front office and general manager and owner who would like to spend money on this sort of stuff, partially because they've seen it come to fruition before and of the relationships our data department has been able to build. Cool, so to recap, it's a very exciting moment in soccer analytics. There's a bunch of good stuff available, and people aren't using it all that much yet. Tracking data is still not super heavily used throughout the industry, and there's a lot of opportunity to continue to build really cool stuff with it. And people are already doing it, and you can often just buy that. To use it effectively, good engineering and spending time on what matters is crucial. And then don't be too precious about building things yourself. Again, people are building them. You can often go get them. But you should be precious about getting them onto the pitch, which is what really matters. And to do that, it can honestly be easier, I think, than a lot of people realize. But it is crucial to have good relationships with the people who will actually manifest them on the pitch. And a lot of times that translation piece from, hey, this is really cool, how do I turn it into soccer terms and deliver it, is also very crucial. So this is my little diagram of how we work. But we ingest data, and we do a cool project, tell people about the project, the visualization piece, and then see it on the pitch, which you've built with relationships. And then, like I mentioned, if you make this spin as fast as you can, you are going to continually gain more competitive advantage. And that is the end. All right, questions? I think Esteban will take a microphone around. Do I point, or do you? Okay.
Thank you, Neil Makritich. That was wonderful. Any discussion around any in-game adjustments like halftime when you might feed some data around things and then the coach responds to it or anything like that?
Yeah, it is a good question, and it's something that we're trying to do more of this season specifically. The MLS has signed some new deals with data providers who have good live streams that are being delivered. I often have said in the past, and still stand by it, that in a single game, usually coaches are going to see just as much as me telling them something at halftime. Again, it goes back to the stacking expertise bit. If I come down to the bench and say like, hey, this guy's on the ball a whole lot, and they'll go like, yeah, we know that. We've done this forever. But there are certain things like height of back line or some horizontal compactness that are harder for coaches to see. And inherently people watch the ball more during the game. So we're hopeful that we can implement some benchmarks. I think the most effective way to do it is take a benchmark and say, we want to hit this by halftime, and then see if we did. But it has to come from the coaching, like talking point. I know I want us to do this.
All right, hey, Alec Moore. I liked the aspect of the visual storytelling. Can you give some examples of how you actually accomplish that in ways that don't fall flat? And then what font did you use in your slides?
Thank you very much for asking. I used Avenir, and I'm a big fan. So some examples. One very simple example is I spent a lot of time on our pre and post match report cover slides, and the way that I've built them is like half of the slide has key points, like full takeaways from the whole document. The idea is you don't have to read the whole document if you just read that one slide and you read those key points. And that's on the left, and it looks nice, and it's just black on a white background, and has some different font sizes for headers. And then on the right is a picture from the match that was of an exciting moment. So usually it's a player celebrating after a goal, or something cool. And a lot of times people like seeing, hey, remember how good that felt when we scored that goal. Doesn't always work. You don't score a goal every game. You don't win every game. But having some visual from the match that ties it back. And it's just a nice landing page. And it's something that I spent a considerable amount of time saying, should this go here? I don't think it should be quite this large of text. And then I highlight players' names in our Sounders green, because I often talk about them in a post-match report. So little touches like that have made a difference in how people interact. And I've got feedback directly from coaches and other members of staff I send these reports to saying, these look great. We like how these look. Nothing about the content of the report. They're just like, this is cool, looks good. So include pictures and include colors. And don't go overboard.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I'm sure Tyler would take your questions afterwards. So please help me with a round of applause for Tyler.